Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is expectations and how expectations open us up for disappointment. And also, when we have expectations of others, we're imposing our values, our judgments, our beliefs on them. And what we're going to do is just have a look at the freedom that's possible when we allow ourselves to be free of expectation. So it should be an interesting conversation. And before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. Now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning. Good morning, Rosalind. Good morning to everyone else who's joining us. So good to have you here. Today we are talking about expectations, and we can have positive expectations, we can have negative expectations. But what those expectations are, it is in fact projections of our thoughts, our beliefs, our um, our own attachments, essentially. And so, if I have an expectation of you, what I've done is I've created an image of who you are to me, and I'm projecting that on you. And then so I've created this dynamic of expectation. Like, I expect you to be a certain way, good, bad, or indifferent. I have a certain notion of who you are and how you are. And that's the lens through which I view you and experience you. And so I'm kind of projecting this on you in a way that um, limits the experience that I can have of you, and limits the connection that we can have, because everything that I'm seeing and thinking is through this lens of judgment, essentially. And then if I do something that is out of keeping with your expectation, then that may result in, well, it may result in surprise, it may result in disappointment, it may be pleasant surprise. But what happens is that judgment or that perception is potentially challenged. The thing is that for the most part, we look for validation of our points of view. And so when I expect you to be harsh or angry, I'm going to act according to whatever that expectation is, right? And so if I'm expecting you to be angry, I might be coming into a conversation, just coming into it being defensive, right? Because I have an expectation that you're going to behave in a certain way. And in some respects, that can be sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. We can, and that's in regard to people, it's kind of a thing that we do to each other that can be pretty brutal in a lot of ways. Let's look at circumstance. So we can have positive or negative expectations. So we expect something, like, let's say we're going on a trip and we expect it to be beautiful, and we expect certain amenities, and we expect all these different things. And then when the circumstance doesn't meet our expectations, what can happen is that we end up feeling disappointment. And when we feel disappointment, with the expectations, we're always measuring, we're always calibrating the experience to the expectation. Like, the expectation is how it should be. This is how things should be. When we get into conversations around should, it's a red flag that we're talking about expectations. And there are, of course, certain expectations that we would hope we could hold, that we would expect someone to be good to their word, right? And then when they're not, that can be not only disappointing, it can be devastating. When we make good morning, is that Dido? Welcome, Enlightened World Network. Great to have you with us. So we're talking about expectations. So when we sign agreements, when we make contracts, hi Dido, so good to have you here. Welcome. When we take vows, the expectation is that those vows, those contracts, those agreements will be kept. Typically, that's the expectation. And when those agreements are broken, then there's a deep disappointment frequently, or anger, or all kinds of other dynamics that show up. And we do so many things in good faith, like taking someone at their word. And when we think about trust, we are kind of in this space of positive expectation, right? To say, well, I trust that you'll keep your word. I trust that our agreements will be honored. So we're talking about all kinds of different dimensions of expectation. And culturally and personally, there are certain contexts for where expectation is fair, right? it's fair to say if you and I agree to meet at a certain place at a certain time, it's fair to expect that we'll both be there. And then if that if one of the people or if the agreement isn't upheld, it's understandable that there can be some disruption, some upset potentially around that. The question is, well, there are a lot of questions about how do we allow ourselves really to be at the effect of expectation, and maybe what are reasonable expectations and what are expectations that are really of our own design, through which we cause ourselves all kinds of pain and suffering. So the pain and suffering angle comes in a lot around shoulds. And so when someone doesn't meet our expectations, even if it is a broken agreement, or even more insidious are the unspoken agreements or the unspoken expectations, that we then can make big stories around. So, for instance, if someone's late, we can make up a story that they don't care about me, or they're not valuing my time, or if someone's responds to something in a way that we don't expect, we can, depending on our own sense of security or lack of security, we might make a story up about ourselves because certain expectations weren't met, and then maybe we didn't meet certain expectations. We have expectations of ourselves, right? We expect ourselves to be able to navigate all kinds of difficult situations with grace at every moment, perhaps, or we expect perfection from ourselves, or expect we expect ourselves to fail, perhaps, or we expect ourselves to sabotage ourselves, or there are all these kinds of expectations that we have that we then project into the world and help to create in certain ways, and also end up being at the effect of when those expectations aren't met, let's say in someone else. So I'm expecting you to be what I call honorable, and maybe you do something that doesn't meet that criteria, then I have all kinds of judgments about who you are and how you are, and I can harbor that and allow it to impact my behaviors going forward, which maybe it should influence my behaviors going forward. But I think that when we look at disappointment and suffering, maybe I should have called this disappointment rather than expectations, because expectations are a much more dimensional kind of conversation, perhaps. But when we feel disappointment, what we get to recognize is that we have an unmet expectation that may have been unspoken or invisible, that was that the expectation of self or other or circumstance. And then we get to look at, well, what was that expectation? What was the underlying expectation that was driving this sense of disappointment? And one of the places that it shows up really, really powerfully, and a place where we can actually create a shift that will provide us with much greater ease in life, is around the shoulds. Believing that things should be a certain way. And when we're disappointed, it's typically connected to a should. It shouldn't be that way, or it should be that way. It should be different than it is, in other words. And when we can find a place of allowing things to be as they are, not that it should be that way or shouldn't be that way, but when we can allow things to be as they are, we have a better ability to metabolize the realities. And so we can rail about it should be, it shouldn't be. However, what we can empower ourselves with is, it is how it is. And when we can come to it is how it is, then we can take appropriate action, or more appropriate action, rather than being in this space of fighting against the realities. It's kind of like trying to swim up the rapids, when we're saying, but it should be different, it should be different. Being in the disappointment and the wound, rather than the acceptance of what's so. Not condoning necessarily, but recognizing this is what is. And the disappointment that I have is because of this expectation. And I can then recognize, well, do I want to be able to keep the expectation? For instance, an expectation of trustworthiness. So do we want to be able to operate from a place of trust until we're educated to a reason not to trust a particular person to behave a certain way, for example? Do we want to operate from trust, or do we allow ourselves, because of disappointment from one person or a violation of trust from one person, do we then make a determination that all people can't be trusted? So we can with trust, I think that we're operating from an expectation. And I don't think it's necessary, not all expectations are bad, right? We're operating from a place of initially trusting or respecting, and then paying attention, being aware, being responsive to what's occurring, and then we can shift our awareness, shift our interaction based on feedback that we're reading in an environment. When we are expecting a particular behavior, even after recognizing that that behavior is not happening, even after having that expectation not met over and over, holding that, continuing to hold that expectation becomes something that is a way that we punish ourselves. It's like the statement, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is definition of crazy, or one of them, right? And it's certainly a recipe for disappointment. So the thing about expectation is that we are kind of imposing a judgment, right? Expectation and judgment kind of are linked in a very important way. And as is expectation with belief. Like there's the undercurrent that's operative is there's certain beliefs and judgments that are driving expectations. And it's not that we need to eliminate expectations, but we can free ourselves from their grip of when they are invisible, when they are unconscious expectations. They have a grip on us. When we recognize, well, I'm expecting this, and being accountable and responsible for that expectation, there's a greater freedom that we can provide ourselves and provide the people in our lives. So all of these considerations guide our relationships with ourselves, with others, with our friends, with our family, with our world. And if we find ourselves in the shoulds, that's a good place to be paying attention and evaluating what is going on here. What is the underlying current? It's all about being able to be more conscious of ourselves and our inner workings so that we can become more free of those invisibly operating currents, to bring them conscious, to bring ourselves to awareness. And then we have a greater sovereignty, a greater ability to participate as conscious beings in our lives. Welcome, Sophia. So wonderful to have you here. Boy, oh boy, it's been forever. Welcome. So anyway, you got here in time to wrap up with us this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, and on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, and also to like and follow the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel. The links are in the description. And until next time, so much gratitude and so much love to you for the opportunity to have these conversations and morning musings together. So once again, so much love.